an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me. I was about to say Unspoiled. This is Spoil Me, covering Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood. Episode 40, Homunculus, or The Dwarf in the Flask. In this episode, we find out exactly what the deal is with Hempstool. Except we kind of don't still. Like, where did this little guy come from, though? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. Max, if you're out there, hello and thank you. So yeah, everybody in the chat is very hyped for this episode because so much is shared here. But I maintain I want to know where this little guy comes from. So let us begin at the very start here, because it's tempting to jump immediately into what's going on with Hohenheim, but that actually is like halfway through the episode that we start to get this whole thing. So this is when we find out about the way that the fort is being taken over. I love that they're like, probably General Armstrong had something to do with this dude's disappearance, but she's also like really smart. So even if she did, it is highly unlikely that we're going to be able to find absolutely anything to like truly pin on her. And there is something about how willing to just, yeah, well, probably, but what can you do? That I found very funny. It's like she's a force of nature and they're sort of, I mean, I guess like it's our job to keep pursuing this, but honestly, why? What are we doing? We all know how this is going to go. The only thing we have to worry about is holding down this fort. As for the general, I'm sure the tigers in Central will make sure she's taken care of. Now, this is said later as well, referring to people at Central as tigers, and then later on somebody's like the tigers versus the bears, which everybody at the like fort is considered a bear. Has this ever been mentioned before? I don't remember this at all. And maybe it's something that like doesn't quite come up in the translation, but it was said in like the original and it just doesn't come through for me. But I was sort of, when he says the tigers at Central, I was sort of like, what does that mean? And I thought that we were going to get more of a real explanation. And we don't really. It just kind of goes over to, the only other time we hear it mentioned is, I think it was Buccaneer who says something about it. But, okay, so this confrontation that she has with the Fuhrer is really something. What a good idea. First, on the way in, she runs into Roy. And she says that he must be well connected to be in Central. And there's something about her saying this. Look, we know that she doesn't like him. We hear that there's like an accusation of cronyism here, like right under the surface. She already has said that she just doesn't want to deal with him, and he has seemed to be very unsurprised by that. There's not even like, he doesn't even really take offense. It's just kind of a like, yeah, she probably did say that. So, yeah, I don't know if there's like a particular history that's like romantic between them, but it definitely feels like he did something personally that she isn't impressed with. And I don't think, she's not an alchemist. So I don't think that she was necessarily involved in what happened in Ishval, but I'm wondering if that has anything to do with it. If she's like aware of how things went in Ishval, and she's just sort of like, I know that you participated in that shit, and I am not impressed by it. But I don't really think that we've heard her like openly say anything about how she feels about what happened there. So I've been sort of like assigning a motivation on to her for this. And I'm not really sure that's like fair, because we haven't really seen her interact with any other alchemist that we know was at Ishval at the time. So I don't really have anybody to compare this interaction with. The only person, like, she doesn't even come face to face with Kimberly, I don't think. It's all of the, like, interactions are staggered in such a way that she's never really around him. So let's see. Damien says tigers are sneaky predators akin to the top brass being sneaky about their true objectives, whereas bears are tough and brute force like the Briggs soldiers. Also, bears are prominent in that area. Erica says, but have they used these metaphors in the show before now? And Damien says, not really. Yeah, and that also, like, it doesn't come across for me because I don't think of a tiger as being sneaky. Like, whether it is or not, that is not a universally thought of trait regarding tigers. The way that it would be for, like, if you said, like, a fox, you could be like, well, maybe they're just saying they're shady like foxes, you know? But, like, that sort of descriptor doesn't really like immediately cause those concepts to jump to mind for me as an American. So yeah, and it's weird that it is only said in this episode the way that it is. Why wouldn't you bring this up before? Like, I feel like calling them tigers, if we're going to talk about them being sneaky, that gives the impression that they like sort of know everybody in Central is sort of full of shit. And I guess that's showing a hand that maybe they just didn't know before. Maybe they're only using it for the first time, that they had been trusting Central up until pretty recently when everything started to go down with Raven. And they were just like, oh, okay, clearly they're full of shit about a bunch of stuff. But again, yeah, I don't know. So, yeah, Roy says, it's, I'm here in Central based solely on merit. And that's when she says, that's rich coming from you. What is the deal? Like, something very specific clearly happened. And he says, sometime we should grab dinner. And she says, I hope you know I could eat you into bankruptcy. And he says, maybe we should skip dinner then. And she says, you're short on both money and nerve, huh? Listen, if this bitch does not stop with giving me lines that I want to use as Facebook group tag ideas, I see, period. So you're short of both money and nerve is such a good tag group. I really like that is such a good response. And I love, like, Roy doesn't even, he's not even like offended. He's just smiling. And he says, maybe I could offer some flowers instead. There are many fine florists here in Central. And she just says, are there, as she walks away. So here's the thing. Is this just a show? Are they just supposed to be kind of trying to make it seem like they're not friends so that she won't fall under suspicion? Is it just for the benefit of everyone around them? And then, like, the floral thing, it seems pretty clear he is hinting to her to go to a florist for a message of some kind. Like, that is obviously some sort of clue. So they have set something up between the two of them, the way that he has with Hawkeye, as we see later, a means of, like, communicating with one another. But when she says, like, that's rich coming from you, it really does not feel like she's lying. It doesn't feel like she's pretending. It feels like she very truly, because, like, even that moment where she's like, I don't need Roy to come. He can stay where the fuck he is. That message came from the lady selling flowers. That was not for the benefit of anybody else because nobody else heard it. So, yeah, she just really must not like him. So, let's see. B. Moore says, I don't think we know the deal, but we do know that the North and East would do military drills. And recall Roy has sometimes put a front of being lazy and unmotivated and incompetent. Her disdain of him was genuine when the brothers went to the North. Damien says, pretty sure he was referencing the woman who was a member of the Armstrong family who posed as a florist. Oh, I thought he was like, hey, so there's somebody that you should probably go see, get a little bit of information. B. Moore says, but I think she is keeping it up to keep the impression up that she wants nothing to do with him. The comment about the florist was to say, I got your messages. Okay, so everybody's got a different response here. I'm thinking he's saying, go to the florist and get notes from me. B. Moore is saying, I think he's saying, I got your messages. And Damien is saying, he's just mentioning somebody from the Armstrong family. Well, it's good to know that there's like no consolidated answer on this. So she is brought to see the Fuhrer. And the way that she plays this is pretty smart. He is like, so I am led to understand that there is some likelihood that General Raven's disappearance is up to you. Like, you did something. And she thinks to herself that there's no point like trying to lie. He's going to know. And she says, I'm sorry, but I just don't get how this guy is like one of your main guys. He is really bad at everything. There is no possible way that he should be on senior staff and then be as loose-lipped as he is. He told me everything. Like, I didn't even really have to prod him. And he told me about who you are, about the whole thing with immortality, about the history of this country. He told me all of it. And honestly, it was kind of pathetic. So I came down here because I figured you're going to need somebody to fill his spot. And I'm just putting my name in the ring because I think that I am much better at this than he was. And it's interesting because he asks something about like, is that why you disposed of him? But she never actually says, yeah, I killed him. She never really specifically confesses to doing anything. She's just talking in general terms about how he clearly was not like up to the standards you would need to have considering what's going on. So I'm not like impressed at all. And I thought that that was kind of interesting because I really expected Bradley to press her a little bit more and be like, so you killed him, right? Like, he never gets an actual answer out of her. And it seems like she's willing to let him think she did. So I don't know exactly what she gets out of, like, keeping the exact words from coming out of her mouth. But it doesn't really matter. I just think, I just thought it was sort of interesting. So he is like, all right, so I have to admit, I kind of like the way you play. And when he stands up, he's got that like one red eye showing. And as I expect you'll understand, my men will be taking over Fort Briggs. But you can, do what he was supposed to do, which is essentially, he seems like the outreach guy. That was what his job was supposed to be, is to like go around and be like, would you be interested in a thing? And I assume like maybe volunteer, like get people to volunteer their personnel for like experimentation or something. But yeah, she's like, well, my guys up there are very good. So I'm sure that they will serve you really well. And he's like, all right, I appreciate that sacrifice. And she has an expression on her face that it's like impassive and it's meant to just look tough. But there is certainly a vibe of just like, I have just thrown them into the midst of this and they don't even know yet that this is going on. So I just have to hope that they are all competent enough to deal with this, because otherwise, I'm not there. I can't help. And this is when we get Buccaneer and that guy with a huge jaw. I can't remember his name, but they're talking about how everybody at the Fort Briggs is united, and that whether or not there are other people from the outside coming in here and trying to fuck with our shit, we all have one another's backs and are on the same wavelength. It's not about Central. It's about us from here. And I found that really interesting, that really there's sort of like hierarchies of loyalty within Central, it seems, or not Central, because this is within the government. And that Fort Briggs is isolated enough that their loyalty to the Führer is certainly second, because their experience out here is just so apart from everything else. So that has led to them becoming their own sort of culture in a way that it's always the North in so many stories, because the North is meant to be, isolated in a way that it's like, not only is it difficult to get to, but also there's not anything up there that most people would want, so nobody bothers going up there anyway, kind of thing. And so we have so many stories in which the North basically follows its own rules. Whatever those rules may be will be different. But, the whole thing with Song of Ice and Fire, the king in the North, they just wanted to self-govern, and they subscribed to sort of older ideas about ways to live and ways to worship. And it's interesting to me to see how that still works out here in the same way, even though they're technically part of the same organization. So, and I think that's exactly what would happen. If you wind up in a spot that it's far from everything, you don't get the same kind of attention, you ceaselessly work to accomplish a goal that is sort of taken for granted, and then people from the outside come in just trying to act like they know how your shit works. I mean, anybody who's worked in retail and just had somebody from fucking the corporate head office come in and tell them how to do their job, y'all know what that is like. Everybody that works with you in that branch is just going to be like, who the fuck does this person think they are? They don't even do this job. They don't know what they're talking about. So this just felt very much like how people would react. So this is when we go to Roy and the conversation that he has with Hawkeye. And this is an interesting moment, because at first Hawkeye is just saying, I'm really working hard because Bradley is certainly efficient and very good at his job. And Roy is like, oh boy, is this going to be what this whole conversation is like? And we see the camera go under the desk and focus on the shadows there. And then she taps on the table twice, and he looks up and really notices it. And she says, apparently Scar is up in the North. The Elric brothers are up there as well. And then he signals back. My former classmates, Lucy and Ian, like to keep me informed. And the way that this goes, when he's putting it together later, I'm trying to figure out exactly, is it just the first letters of the names that she's giving him? And that's all it is, right? It's just the various names that come up. He keeps track of them. But I do like to, Roy is like, well, you see, I even have to work through my lunch break because he gives me so much to do. I just can't keep up, which is a lovely overlay so that he can just write at the table while they're eating lunch and nobody is going to think about it. But so yeah, she is telling him all of these things. And then when he goes and decodes it in the bathroom stall, it says, Salim is a homunculi. And Roy is just like, motherfucker. And then he burns it and puts the ashes in the toilet. And I'm just like, I really hope that's enough, because I don't understand what is possible in this world. And if there is a way to put that piece of paper back together again from its ashes and have somebody read that she was like giving up information, I will be very upset. I am hopeful that this method is safe from Salim, because I had said to you guys how I was worried about writing and whether or not he could like read things, because we see that there are eyes as well as mouths. So like he's watching, but how much can he hear? And like, will he notice the taps? Like there's so much. And I'm just going to assume that this works. And that is what I'm assuming. And I'm just going to let it go. So yeah, I really do enjoy though. That was a clever way. They obviously have this set up from a while ago to communicate this way. And it's clever. So this is when we start the whole thing with Mr. Hohenheim. First, we see Father, who appears to be almost asleep. It's like this weird sort of moment of either reverence or maybe exhaustion. And we see him grow young. And then all of a sudden somebody yelling, "Hey, over here." And it's this little shadow in a flask that is talking to a young Hohenheim. Just for the record, young Hohenheim, Mei Chang would be absolutely all over this. Can you imagine? She would lose her mind. Like, this is exactly what she was hoping it looked like. And I cannot help but laugh because poor Ed, he's so small. So this little shadow, when I say where did it come from, everything just opens with him sitting with a broom, kind of like dicking around when he's supposed to be working. And this thing asking him, "Yo, hey, so I'm alive in this flask. Is that impressive to you?" And we find out that it was like made with his blood, and so it feels a kind of like kinship and a debt to him in a way. But other than knowing his blood was involved, I don't think that we are given a lot of information to hint how this thing was created. It looks, in the way that it's just this like darkness, like the figure in the portal. And it has a similar voice, as far as I can remember, to the figure in the portal. So it seems like it's like a piece of that. But I don't know how you get just a piece of it. I don't even know how that would work, you know? So I love that the homunculus just keeps on being like, "You're not too bright, though. I don't know if I'm glad to have your blood or not." And he asks him what his name is. And he says, number 23. He's a slave. And I thought that this was really surprising because I didn't know that slaves were a thing. And then we find out just how far back this is. Like, this is, you know, we could say that this is like ancient Rome, basically. And it's the equivalent of what is happening here. So there's this moment of just like, a slave, they do that? And no, not anymore, but they sure did. So yeah, he is talking with this little creature, and the voice is just so good. I love it so much. And he's like, "Well, in exchange for your blood, I'm going to give you a name." And because number 23 is not good enough. So at first he says, guys, Theophrastus Bombastus, which only sort of pointed even more towards ancient Rome for me, even though it's not actually, you know, but it just had a kind of vibe of very intense names. And he's like, that's too long. It's got, yeah, you're not smart enough for a name with that many syllables. How about Van Hohenheim? How does that sound? And he's just like, yeah, all right, I'll do that. And I'm extremely curious if this is from anything. Like, Did this little guy choose that for a specific reason, or was it really at random? Like, where did he even get it from? It doesn't matter, but I just, I'm curious. Unless it actually does matter, of course, which, perhaps. Oh my God. Alex says, Philippus Aureolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim is the name of a real-life alchemist. Shut your mouth. That is no human's name. Are you serious? Philippus Aureolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim. Everybody just calm down. That is just... No, that's too much. You know what, though? The one thing I can say, you got that many names, and you don't really have to worry about the Fae. As long as you keep those under wraps, you have just got like an endless supply of backups so that they can't really get a hold of you. So maybe, if you have a lot of dealings with the Fae, or anticipate that you may, get extra names in that case. But that's the only reason for that many names. Otherwise, that's ridiculous. So anyway, all right, cool. So both names that he suggests come from the same root name. That's fun. So he says to Hohenheim, okay, so I guess I'll teach you how to read and write. And Hohenheim is like, I don't need to know that. Why? What? And he's like, you don't need to know that? So you're telling me you just want to stay a slave? Is that what you're saying? You're just going to stay doing this, and you don't have any ambitions to do anything more than that or get out of here? Really? I'm stuck inside a flask, and like, low-key, you feel like you're in the same situation as me, and you're out here with legs, and you can walk around. So what's your excuse? So at this point, he's like, look, I'm going to teach you some stuff, man. I'm going to do this. And Hohenheim is like, all right, what are you? Who are you? What do I call you? And all of a sudden, the face appears. You can call me the dwarf in the flask, Homunculus. And his little eye and his little mouth. And honestly, I was thinking that this was going to turn into Salim. But instead, it turns into Father. Asterisk. It turns into Father Asterisk, as far as I know. But perhaps the reason that Salim is like, manifests the same kind of shadow and faces and stuff is because he's the first created after Father. And it's like directly from Father's like substance that he is formed, and so it's more of a direct like one-to-one. I don't know, but I'm just putting it out there. So we see literally the sand through the hourglass and the rotation of the sun and moon. And he has begun to learn alchemy and is being taken seriously in a way that does not actually explain how he goes from being a slave to being like mentored. It's just, I guess, assumed that he has such any talent that they take notice of him by accident. But yeah, so he has this like passing the test, all is one and one is all. It's the same kind of training that Ed and Al had gotten. And he's told, you have passed. You are now an alchemist. Well done, child. For some reason, this master is like giving him this quiz on a cliffside while holding the flask with the homunculus in it. I don't really know what it is he thinks he's doing with the homunculus, because it really feels like the homunculus is just like, hey man, we're going to go to this cliffside, so if you wouldn't mind picking me up and carrying me over. It feels like the homunculus is running shit, is what I'm saying. And I am not even certain that the master even realizes he's carrying it, because it seems almost as if it could just probably like get him to do things without him even noticing. I don't trust it. That's what I'm saying. So he has this, I'm still only fit to be an assistant. My skill is nothing near yours, master. And then we see the eyeball open up inside and this like kind of sound. So this is when the homunculus is telling him, all right, so maybe we'll begin to move forward with each of our ambitions. Like, what is it you're after? And Hohenheim says maybe he would have a family one day. And I love the homunculus is just like, I guess. It's very like my energy, honestly, which is to say, I would love it if I could be completely self-sufficient and never have to depend on anybody else, but that is just not how communities work. And this dude is very much the same. Like, it's really a bummer for y'all that you have to make communities and breed with each other or else you just stop existing. That's just kind of a racket, if you ask me. And Hohenheim is like, that's like our whole thing as people, though. That makes us happy. So I'm not surprised you don't get it, but really that's like kind of what makes it all worth it. And the homunculus just says, sure, whatever you say. And when Hohenheim asks him, what do you want? The homunculus says, I think I'd be happy if I could just leave this flask. And I found it interesting that Hohenheim does not offer to like take the stopper out. There is just an understanding here that it's stuck there and he isn't allowed to touch it. And I'm not sure if that's because of retribution from his master or if he has a suspicion letting it out would like do something crazy. And so he's just kind of not interested in messing with that. But he doesn't even express any desire to like make this happen for the homunculus, which I did think was kind of surprising. I expected him to be like, oh man, you've done so much for me. I wish that I could help you kind of thing. Doesn't even come up, but what can you do? But so, okay. Then we have the conversation between him and this king, the king from the like city that there is a complete ruin where it used to be. And Obimor says, no, it's because he'd die if he was let out. That's right, because this guy threatens to smash his flask. And I remember thinking, you say you would smash it, but doesn't that just let it free? And then I realized, like, oh, no, that's like, apparently the way it's being put forth is that it would kill him. So, all right, got you. Thank you for that, Bimora. But yeah, he says, you wouldn't dare to destroy such an important source of knowledge. And the king is like, all right, look, just tell me, is immortality possible or not? And the homunculus, at first, is being real mocking. Oh, getting old, buddy? What a shame. No surprise that you're trying to find immortality when you're over the hill, really not looking good. And then he smiles and is like, yeah, I'm right. I'll tell you how to do it. And then we cut to some guys who are digging canals. And they're like, oh yeah, these are supposed to be, you know, like for the good of the people. And everybody's like, look at him always caring about us. What a great king we've got. And I'm just like, oh no, this isn't good. At this point, we have there must be no survivors. And there's an attack on this village. And all of these people are slaughtered. And their blood runs down into the channels. And it's like I had sort of wanted to give the king I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt that he didn't know how many people were going to die. And that this was something that he got kind of tricked into. But once we really see the like infrastructure that went into it, it's very clear the king knew fucking exactly what he was doing. And he's fine with it. So, I mean, I just can't imagine. I truly can't. Being that willing to kill like so many people just to keep living forever. Like, look, I'm not going to lie. I would love to just be able to like lock myself into looking a certain age. Everybody wants that, right? Like, I get it. But living forever, I don't know, man. Like, living is rough, you know? And it has its moments. I'm not against it. But doing it like a bunch of times in a row, I think I want to pass. Like, that's just too much. Once is enough. I'm good. Enough good things do not consistently happen to make up for living like 1,000 years and the amount of bad things you would see within that time. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see it for myself. So anyway, then we hear all these people talking about how everybody in this village died. What could be doing this? And then we see fucking Hohenheim talking about what a tragedy that is. And the homunculus just says, yeah, real tragic. And fucking Hohenheim has still not figured it out. Still not putting it together. Bless his sweet summer child self. We see the like mark on the wall. Each of these areas burst into flame to indicate that that spot was also annihilated. And slowly it builds up until we've got this fully powered. So then they come to tell him, your transmutation circle is complete. Let's do this. And this guy says, took long enough. And I'm like, oh, wow. Sorry that a slaughter of these people was inconvenient for you, sir. I hate him. So the way that this is presented to him is, here is the center of the circle. You and your guys will be totally safe because you're in the middle. And once you make the sacrifice of your blood, you will achieve immortality, and what happens won't affect you, just the people outside the circle. And it begins, he drops his blood into this like vase jar thing, and then this like fog begins to come up, like smoke, up from the vase itself and spread in this cloud over them. But then like a bunch of shadow hands come up from underneath them. So it's sort of like darkness coming from a couple different angles. And they're all looking around and he's like, this is immortality? This doesn't seem right. What is... And then he hears two of his guys start choking and he looks around and they're all dropping dead. And he says, you said if we were in the center, we wouldn't be harmed, as he starts choking and topples over. And the homunculus says, yeah, so the funny thing about the center of the circle is that wasn't it. This is it right here. This is the true center. So congratulations, Hohenheim. You are about to be immortal. I am opening a doorway. Blood brother of mine, von Hohenheim, right now you and I are at the center of everything. There is something very curious about the way that he says this that feels truly sincere. Like he really seems to be going, I am so happy to share this moment with you, bro. Like, you and me, eye to eye forever, you know? Like, look, I did this without telling you, granted, but you know we're on the same side, and this is like for both of us, for real, for real. And I just thought that that was really interesting, that there seems to be almost like a real connection that the homunculus feels to him that I wouldn't have expected at all. It's just, you know, I guess it's the link of blood, and that maybe it's not even like an emotional thing so much as a thing that happens because of that like material link between the two of them. But anyway, yeah, so we see the eye like open underneath his feet, and then it expands and expands and expands. And even when it stops, it's like covering the entire palace. All of these like shadow strings begin to come out of the ground, and we hear people screaming. And Hohenheim kind of falls backward into the portal, into this like abyss area, falling apart in the way that we saw Ed's like various body parts fall apart in their little sort of pixelated squares. At the same time, the homunculus is like also falling apart, dissolving, and looking delighted about it, by the way. He is grinning ear to ear. He is so excited. This is just like him on a roller coaster for the first time. And then we have the sunrise, and Hohenheim wakes up and looks around and is like, what the fuck? Because all these dudes are dead. He runs up to his master at first and is like, maybe he's fine. Nope, he's dead. And that's already bad enough. But then he goes to the balcony and looks out, and he sees absolutely everybody in the city laid out. And there's this moment where he just says, somebody, there must be someone left. And the voice actor does such a good job on this delivery. It's so like desperate and in denial. And I mean, can you imagine, you guys, you wake up and everyone in like your entire city has dropped dead except you. And there's like no way to contact anybody or find out what's going, like, I mean, I just don't, it's already so bad. And then what happens? He's like saying this, and then we hear this voice say, all of their souls have been taken from them. And we turn around, and Hohenheim says, Your Majesty, are you all right? Because he assumes. But then he looks up, and he realizes that it's somebody who looks exactly like him. It's an exact copy. And it is the homunculus who says, so I made a receptacle for myself. I can walk on my own two legs now. It's pretty dope. How are you feeling in your body? Because just FYI, you can't die. So enjoy that. And it's really, I was sort of expecting that maybe there would be some sort of like sign between the two of them that they are different people, because in the present, Father is like very pale all over. He's got a much more washed out, carved from marble look than Hohenheim does, who looks like a regular human being. And I don't know if that is like supposed to be, it could be a number of things. One, it could just be over time, because this is an artificially made body, it starts to wear down in a way that Hohenheim's doesn't. It could be that every time he makes another homunculus with some of his like own essence, it dilutes him somehow, and like he begins to just sort of wash out. It's like a toner cartridge running out. It could be like all kinds of things that have affected him over time. Maybe he's not actually immortal, and part of the reason for trying to make a new transmutation circle is because he wants like a real body, and he's sick of this one. I don't know, but this is when he's like, hey, so for a minute, I want you to just listen. You hear them, right? That's the voices of all the people in this country who were offered in exchange for your immortality. Well, half their lives were for me, actually. And poor Hohenheim, you see him be absolutely devastated by this. He's like, it's this moment of despair with his hands on either side of his face and the camera traveling down to the faces that are in him in a very like envy-ish sort of way, which I had said before that like when he like digs in his fingers and some drops of blood pour out and like drop into the ground and run off, I was like, that feels like what was going on with envy, but like, I don't, how is that? And I think maybe that's what's going on, and that he's like learning to use the souls as like allies. Like he's trying to help them or get them on his side somehow. And I don't know if envy ever uses souls this way, but because like envy can take all these different forms, but she can take the form of people who are still alive. So I don't know. But it does feel like really similar. And the homunculus just does not seem concerned with how upset Hohenheim is. He is just like, thanks so much for your cooperation. And then it ends because we go to Hohenheim, who has just woken up on a train. He fell asleep in the midst of his memory. Or he fell asleep and dreamed the memory, really, is what it is. And I'm really curious whether or not the homunculus ever, like, realized or cared how devastated he was by this. Do you think the homunculus ever was like, yo, dude, I gave you like a really, really nice gift. Like, that's a really expensive gift, actually. And you just don't really seem to appreciate it. And you're like crying and like, what the fuck? I put a lot into that. But, you know, maybe not. Maybe he just doesn't care. I don't know. Anyway, so here comes Izumi. And she recognizes him and is like, wait, you're Hohenheim. All right. I know your sons. I taught them. And he's like, oh, it's you. It's really cool to meet you. I bet they were a handful. And she's in the midst of being like, oh, no, they were great. And I was like, they were a handful. Don't you lie to him. And she starts coughing. And her husband is getting the medicine out. She's trying to say, I'm fine. And Hohenheim sees the blood and is like, oh, yeah, you are not fine at all. Hey, Hubs, go and get her a car. We need to get to a hospital ASAP. And the husband takes off, and Hohenheim has zeroed in and is figuring out, all right, something is up with you. And he says, you have seen the truth. What did you sacrifice? And at first, she clearly is not interested in talking about it with him. But he's like, come on, just be honest with me. And she says, my insides were taken. I was trying to bring my child back to life. And he says, I see. And he closes his eyes as he has his hand on her shoulder and says, I see. Yes, I see. And I'm like, you mean that literally, don't you? Like, it feels like he can literally see into her and tell what's going on with her. So she looks like kind of bummed at this discussion. And very abruptly, he says, I'm sorry, and reaches forward into her abdomen with his bare hand in just the creepiest way imaginable. His glasses do that reflective thing. Blood pours out of the space where his hand went and also out of her mouth. And her husband, who is the best ever, comes up and decks Hohenheim across the face. Which, look, Hohenheim might have a lot of reasons for behaving the way that he has, but there is still a lot of residual dislike there, and I'm not mad at anybody who decides to punch him in the face. Like, he didn't warn anybody about what he was about to do. That's kind of what you get, dude. So, her husband comes over and, like, helps her up, and she's like, no, I'm fine. And he's like, he shoved his hand into your stomach. What do you mean? And she reaches down and realizes that there's no wound there. There's still blood. I will say there's a bunch of blood on her shirt. So it's like very clearly, you know, something did happen, but he didn't leave a mark. There's nothing going on. And then she says, and my breathing is a lot easier now. Huh. So Hohenheim then says, your organs were taken away as a testament to your sin. They cannot be brought back. But I did rearrange your entrails somewhat to improve the flow of blood. I want to make it all up in them guts joke. Oh, man. I'm sorry, guys. But honestly, being like, I rearranged those entrails. Like, that's not a good joke at all. But man, that is getting me. But yeah, so anyway, she is doing better thanks to him, but he can't just fix it. And he says to her, you cannot just give into your fate. And she's like, all right, look, I know that you're their father, but like, who are you though? For real. And he says, I am a philosopher's stone in the form of a man. That's what I am. So he doesn't really answer her question who he is, but one could argue that is more important, honestly, at this point in time. So that's fine. So he is a homunculus in the form of a man. And then we go to credits. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, there is an after credit sequence here. And I did remember to watch it. Thank you, Max, again, for letting me know. And it's Ed and Dr. Marco, and they are talking about the properties of philosopher's stones and the different ways that they can manifest. Celestial stone, the grand elixir. And it's not necessarily a stone. The one Dr. Marco had was semi-liquid. The one that Kimberly had is similar to a crystal. And then he says something like, I would have expected, Miles says, I would have expected a bigger one than what we have seen. And Ed says, yeah, well, to make one that's like bigger, I assume you'd have to kill thousands of people. And it might be possible, but I wouldn't want to ever see it. And that's really too bad, Ed. Sorry for it, bud, but yeah, funny story. You have, and it made you. So if Ed is, because like what we have thought this entire time is that Ed and Al are candidates for sacrifice because they went through the portal because they tried to do human transmutation. And we saw that Father was surprised at the fact that Ed and Al were children of Hohenheim because he did not think Hohenheim could have kids. So there's just definitely a moment of like, no shit. But does that make them less or more desirable as sacrifices now? Like, I feel like it would make them more desirable because they are descended from but perhaps there's a part of them that is homuncul-like? Homunculish? Homunculicious. I'm just wondering if there's anything about homunculi that they have inherited and just don't know about yet. I don't know, but it doesn't seem like... I don't know if it was accidental that Hohenheim's wife got pregnant or if he knew he could have kids and went ahead and had them on purpose. I get the sense that he probably thought he couldn't. And it was a bit of a surprise when he did, and that's why he coped so poorly with it. But I don't know. So let's see. Candace says, ho-ho gives nothing away ever. Michael says, now I want a falafel scone. I do not know what that means. Max says, did you happen to notice anything about the people of Xerxes? No, I didn't. I feel like maybe I was supposed to have now. Apologies. Let's see. Damien says, no, they're on an even playing field of the other candidates. Alex says, so now that we know Hohenheim's backstory, do you have any theories about why he left his family? I mean, the main thing that I, like, if I were in his shoes, it would be very concerning to me to have to explain to my kids why I don't age at all as they begin to grow up and I continue to look the same. Like, how do you tell your kids that you're immortal without explaining how that happened? And if you have to explain, you got to tell them about this fucking horrifying shit, which no parent wants to explain. Oh, yeah, I'm the result of like a genocidal experiment, you know? So really, it could just be as practical a reason as that. But it could also be like, I know the homunculus is out there and maybe like it could find me and do something to them for some reason. It doesn't seem like that though, because the homunculus seems to kind of be tight with him, at least in its own mind. It's like, yo, we're bros and we are on the same side and you're welcome. I got you this present. So like, does Hohenheim recognize, he says something about to Pinocchio, how it's getting bad and it's going to get worse and you need to hide. So I think a part of it is that he is recognizing like the warning signs of what happened so long ago to create him, and that there is clearly like something else of that nature in the works, but it's like on an even larger scale. And I don't know, like, the thing is, if he wants to save his kids from that, he could just like take them with him. But by leaving the way that he did, he left them alone so that they made themselves into candidates by doing this experiment. So like, if he's trying to keep them safe, he really shot himself in the foot on that one. And that's really the only other thing I can think. He tries to tell Pinocchio to like leave town and she won't. So I don't know. I really don't. Yeah. So just the whole way that this, like, I can't get over, and I do not doubt at all that this would happen this way, because people are just so sure that they are like really special and that they have stumbled upon the like one real answer that everybody else is either too stupid to see, or they aren't like good enough to have been granted the honor of accessing this information or whatever. But the fact that this king of Xerxes has this little shadow man that he doesn't even know what it is, telling him to slaughter thousands of his own people, and this will give him immortality, and he just does it. He just does it. Trusting this thing is so whack. I know it would work. We've got people out here drinking bleach to kill COVID, for God's sake. People are idiots. And there's no reason a king is any smarter than anybody else. So, do I buy that he would do it? 100%. Don't get me wrong. But I can't fathom taking the advice of a little cloud of fog that seems way too knowledgeable for its own good and just like doing what it told me. No, could not be me. Have some fucking paranoia, sir. Like, you don't know what this thing is, whose agenda might be behind it. It doesn't even have to be that it itself is after anything. It could just be made by somebody who was after something. And you're just out here obeying its orders like a chump. I mean, fuck, you know, get some dignity, man. Get some self-respect. That is straight up simp behavior. Let's see. Max says, it's a small thing, but Ed and Al have been the only ones with gold eyes in the show till now. May not have noticed, but they do make a bit of a deal about the blue eyes of many Amesrians and the red eyes of Ishvalans. You know, I never noticed that they don't have the blue eyes that everybody else has. I didn't notice. Like, in this episode, I noticed that Hohenheim has gold eyes, because the way they zero in on them a couple times, I was like, huh, oh. But I never noticed that, like, Ed and Al have gold eyes, too. I just never really registered for me. Damien says, old age desperation, the homunculi played up his fears of dying. I mean, still, you know, it just feels like such a blatant manipulation on the outside that the idea of just falling for that, it's like one step away from like, well, I told some other guys how to do it and they're out there living on the beach. And, you know, it's like somebody, like an actual con artist trying to convince you that they've gotten this to work for other people, man. So there's no reason that, like, we can't do this together. It's beneficial to both of us. Like, dude, get a hold of yourself. People are really out here trusting clouds. Why not? They trust Twitter. Sorry, the chat is going quick. Alex says, in the first opening of FMA Brotherhood, it shows young Hohenheim at the start. Ah, okay. Erica says, I wonder if Xerxes was destroyed long enough ago that most people don't remember the characteristics. Yeah, that's a good question, actually, that their gold eyes haven't really, like, excited much comment. Damien says, yeah, that's why the first opening was flagged as a spoiler. Oh, okay. Yeah, there have been a couple things that I had wondered if there were spoilers based on, like, Owen's reaction. Because I was wondering if there's anything that gives away that, like, Wrath is the Führer or who Pride is or anything like that. Because I could see it being really tempting to illustrate the opening credits with really high impact visuals of Wrath and Pride, you know, which would be a massive spoiler. But it's still something that I could see them doing because evidently they don't really care about that. But yeah, so a lot of information here, but I really do want to know who created this little homunculus to begin with and, like, what he was trying to do. Is this what he was going for? Or was he trying to do something else and this is what he wound up with by accident, you know? So anyway, okay, I am going to wrap up, but thank you guys again very much for coming and hanging out with me. This was a super fun episode. Thank you again to Max for commissioning this. I hope that everybody has been enjoying it. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.